Welcome back. So, to start off the year 2026, we're going to cover The Kid LAROI's new album Before I Forget. Now, obviously, there's going to be albums in the coming weeks that I'm much more interested in, but it's always nice, especially with the channel, to dive into stuff that I wouldn't really do otherwise. And I've never listened to a full Kid LAROI project, and the last time I listened to The Kid LAROI in a heavy rotation was all the way back in 2018 with Diva, which also featured Little Tekka. When that song came out in the summertime around that period, it was on heavy replay, heavy rotation. But again, I've never listened to a full project from the Kid LAROI. Now, the main kind of things I took from the Kid LAROI is a lot more of an unhinged vocal delivery and vocal performances, especially melodically. And it kind of reminded me a little bit of Post Malone. And I'm going to make some correlations with Post Malone to the Kid LAROI, especially with this project and 12 Karat Toothache. I think both of these albums actually carry a lot of the same positives and negatives from both of those projects that I'm seeing. But so far, a critic score of a 60, a user score of a 59 on Before I Forget. It's rare that you find an album that has both the critics and the users very much in tow with each other, and these numbers come from Album of the Year. So as we go through this project, this is obviously not the full track list. I'm not going to talk about every single song here, but it kind of is going to dive into the positives and the negatives. So Me Plus You, the way that this album starts is kind of a Trojan horse. It's more of a rap talking performance, which coming into a Kid LAROI project, I kind of wasn't really expecting that all too much. But I find that the hip hop influenced instrumental is not the tone that this album is going for at all, and it's kind of throws you for a loop, especially considering when you listen to this album all the way through, you realize that that's not the main kind of tone this album is going for. The rap talking performance that Kid LAROI is bringing is fine, but I just feel it's just kind of disjointed, and it just feels kind of very much like a mess. And I feel like there's a couple songs in this project where there's a lot going on in these songs, to the point where it just feels like nothing is kind of gelling together. And Me Plus You being the intro track, having that problem, doesn't set this album on the best foot, which is a shame, because when you get to July, Private, and Come Back, that three run of songs kind of gets into this more synthy, kind of nostalgic feeling, 80s synthy pop kind of sound. And I think this is where the Kid LAROI does work well with the most. Especially July, I do really like the vocal melodies, especially towards the chorus that the Kid LAROI is hitting. He's hitting a lot more higher notes. And it's not to say that the Kid LAROI has kind of muted his sound, but he's not really using that kind of, it's almost like goat-like kind of vocals that, again, Post Malone uses sometimes. But he doesn't really use those unhinged vocal performances that I've kind of attributed to him on this project. It sounds a lot smoother, whether that's vocal maturity, maybe it's trying to kind of fit into different pockets and vocals. But on July, with this kind of 80s synth pop, like kind of electro pop mix, I think that it works. But there is a lot of tracks on here that kind of capture that same sound, and it can become a little bit monotonous. But I believe July is the best example where it's a good mix, it's great production as well, and I think it's one of the best hooks that the Kid LAROI brings on this project. Rather Be kind of goes back to the same problem I had with Me Plus You. One, the song is too long. Two, it goes for more of the hip-hop influence production, especially with Live on the production as well, I believe. The song is basically two songs into one, and there's just a lot going on the song. It just feels kind of monotonous. You can drone it out very fast. Once you get to the Live part, though, I've actually really liked Live on his last album, I believe it's called Euphoria, and I think this production style is a lot more hip-hop inspired. It sounds a lot like it's from Euphoria, this song, so it fits very well with his vocal style and his vocal performance and his rapping. But again, it's just another problem where the album has a false start. It gets into the tone it wants to, or I think is his best pocket, and then it throws it into something that, again, is completely a curveball, and it just doesn't work. Sometimes you can have an album where you can stick with the same sound and then throw a massive curveball into it, and it can work flawlessly. Or it can cause the listener to perk up, listen, and to create some of the best moments in the project. This here, though, I feel like is not the greatest example. Now, 521 is where I see the correlations to 12 Karat Toothache of why I like that album and why I didn't like that album so much. 521 is a lot more acoustic based, it's a lot more stripped back, it's a lot more minimal, and I think it allows for the Kid LAROI to flourish in his vocal performances and his delivery. I think the melodies that he hits are fantastic. It sounds a lot more stripped back, it sounds a lot more raw. And that's where the moments on the 12 Karat Toothache that really struck me the most were those vocal, raw performances that were very stripped back, very country influenced, very folky influenced. But I think 521, I think, is the best example of where the Kid LAROI strips everything back and allows the artist to fully flourish and to show his capabilities and show potential in different avenues and different sounds. Unfortunately, we don't get that sound very much on this project. Now, I think the best mix of hip hop and pop on this project. Oftentimes, the pop sound works by itself. It works okay, but the hip hop sound I find doesn't work too well on this project. But with Coldplay, I find that the hip hop influenced beat, especially with the higher BPM of the drums, the little bit harder bass hits, but also with this airy kind of ethereal synth to it mixed in to create that pop kind of sound that leans both of them together. I think this song is the best combination of both of those powers. And it's catchy, it's very entrancing, and it does have a little bit of knock to it. I think it's a nice kind of mixing of different kind of sounds, mixes of different genres. And I think it just works very well. Then we get to the moment. This is the problem where this song has just way too much going on. Now, I was talking about Coldplay with the different kind of the BPMs, the higher BPM of the drums. This song has about 2 or 3 different kind of beat rhythms that it goes into with the drum hits. And I feel that it just does not work in correlation with the Kid LAROI's performance, which on this song as well is very weak. I feel like the Kid LAROI singing on this song in particular is one of the weaker parts in this entire project. And when you have different BPMs, different drum hits coming in at different kind of tempos and different kinds of speeds, the weaker performance can sometimes fall back behind the beat. Sometimes it can go a little bit forward into the beat, and it can throw it off at certain points in the song. And that's where I feel like the song is just kind of an overall really bad mess. I can appreciate the attempt, I can appreciate the experimentation, but on the moment, I feel like this song is just everything being thrown together and it just is not working. Which, in correlation with Coldplay, I think that's a song where everything works. The moment is where it doesn't. Now, Never Came Back has another. That's another common problem this album. Back to this album that it has is that it's a Trojan horse. Now, it starts off with almost like this dance EDM breakbeat that starts off the song, but all of a sudden it cuts into this shimmering guitar ballad with almost like these kind of light clap hits as the drums. And the Kid LAROI's performance, along with these shimmering kind of glistening guitar sounds and with this very light drum, it creates probably another one of the best songs on the project and allows, again, for the Kid LAROI's vocals to shine and allow him a little bit more vocal flexibility to do something a little bit more interesting and something a little bit more potent and powerful on this project. But again, we don't really get those moments that really allow the Kid LAROI to shine. And back when you were mine, the last song in this project kind of has the same problem that the moment has. There's too much going on. Way too many things going on at once, trying to capitalize on a bunch of different sounds falling together, but it just really doesn't. So to kind of have the spark notes of why I'm having problems with this project. One, I find that on the tracks that I didn't mention, I find that the Kid LAROI's distinctive kind of unhinged vocal delivery that I've heard on Wasting Angels, that I've heard on Diva, that I've heard on a bunch of other songs and singles and snippets that I've heard, I find on this project, he really scales back his vocal performance to where he sounds pretty much like everybody else. Now, I know he's signed, I believe, to Justin Bieber's label, And I know there's the capability and also the wanting to grow as an artist, especially to grow in your vocal range and vocal delivery. But I find on Before I Forget, I feel that the Kid LAROI really mutes himself and really subdues a lot of his vocal performances on here. Now, when it does hit, when the Kid LAROI does kind of step outside and kind of show his true vocal ability, I think it works very well. But a lot of the times on this project, I feel that it's very subdued. It's very much to the background, and also the mixing of the project as well makes his vocals sound a little bit back and not really fully into the mix, where his vocals can sound very, again, the word I'm going to use is very subdued. Again, another problem that I have with this project is some songs are trying way too much and it just doesn't work. And I think the intro, which is Me Plus You, the outro of Back to When You Were Mine, and the moment really show that some songs and some combinations really don't work. And there's a lot of stuff in between this project that can sound very samey. It can sound very monotonous. That 80s pop sound can work well, but I feel that with the 44-minute runtime, this album can very much really drag, especially when you get towards the halfway point, which does have some of the best and brightest moments in this project. But when you can't captivate a listener for a 44-minute project, I think it goes to show that the album tone that you were going for, or the performances that you're really going for, is not really sticking the landing. And especially for myself, it just really didn't stick the landing that well. There's some songs I like. There are some streaks of this album that I do enjoy. But overall, I'm kind of feeling about a 4 out of 10 on this project. For my first foray into a Kid LAROI album, I feel, again, I kind of just miss like those Wasting Angels and those kind of more unhinged performances that the Kid LAROI came into not just rap, but the pop scene with. It made him interesting. It made him a little bit more unique among everybody else. But now he's starting to sound like everybody else. And it's starting to become a point where the album just becomes somewhat anonymous. It sounds like any other pop star can make this project. But yeah, that's my feelings on this project. The production overall is pretty decent. And I feel that the 80s and pop attempts on here do sound relatively good. But when you have a whole album of this, and then when the curveballs thrown at this album don't work, it can become a disjointed and kind of just a little bit of a mess. But I do appreciate that there's some attempts on here to try something different. But I think going forward in future projects, I think we need to try something more melodically interesting. We need to push ourselves melodically, because I think that's where the biggest dividing factor is. The production can be good, but when your singing and your melodic performances are just kind of all right and not really working out to the best of your powers, that causes that divide, especially for myself. But that's just me. Let me know if you listen to this. Do you like it? Do you hate it? And what would you rate this album on a scale of 1 to 10? Thank you very much for watching. Again, a Bruno Mars video is coming. Don't Be Dumb video is coming. The year is starting off very strong. So if you want to subscribe to the channel, look for updates and album recommendations and album reviews, you're more than welcome to do so. Have a blessed day.